Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I'm going to be trying out Claire Saffitz's recipe for Apple-Walnut upside down cake. So I am super excited to try this recipe out today for two reasons. So first, it's the tail end of fall here in New York, which means that we've got tons of great, fresh, local apples. And then second, I've never made an upside down cake before, so it's something I've always wanted to try, and I'm excited to give it a go today. So I do these Bon Appetit recipe tests every single Wednesday. If you like this one, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Without any further ado, let's get into this recipe. So step one here is taking our walnuts, and we're just going to toast these up. So I've got my oven preheated to 350 degrees, and I'm just going to pop this into the oven for 8 to 12 minutes, tossing halfway through, just to get them darkened up and bring out those great flavors. Next, we're going to prep the apples. So Claire calls for 3 large or 4 small apples. I am using a smaller sized apple today because I think it'll look nicer to have more apples on the surface of the cake. And when it comes to baking with apples, you want to use a firm apple. So Claire says she typically likes pink ladies. I am using Gala apples today. So really whatever you can find that's a hard baking apple that'll kind of hold up to the heat of the oven, that would be great. Sometimes when I'm peeling apples, I like to see if I can get the entire peel off in one kind of swift motion. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's kind of a fun game to play, and it helps make a potentially tedious task feel like a little bit more fun. Nice. All right, so we just need to halve and core the apples. I'm using a sturdy metal half tablespoon here, which is about the size of the core of the apple. And so I'm gonna just go in and try to scoop it out neatly. If you had a melon baller, that might be something that works well. Ooh, this apple piece broke. All right, so I don't want to have a fractured apple from the get-go. If it breaks during the process, whatever, but I want to start off on the right foot. So we'll just get this guy peeled up and I'll have a little apple snack. Everything's going to be okay. Then I'm just going to kind of pop these up on the side and just go in and make a little V. And I think that that looks okay. And you can see the walnuts are much darker than when they went in, so we're just going to let these cool off to room temperature. All right, so I've got the 10-inch cast iron skillet preheated over medium heat, and it feels like it's going to be hot to the touch here, so I'm going to drop in 2 tablespoons of room temperature butter, and this is starting to sizzle almost straight away. Okay, so that looks like an even coating of butter, and our apple halves are going to go in face down first. So we're going to cook these for 5 to 10 minutes until the bottom cut side is golden brown. So the amount of time that this will take depends on what apples you're using. I'm using a firm, not super juicy apple, so mine probably will crisp up a little bit faster. You don't want to keep lifting these and peeking and disturbing them during this process. You want to let that cut side remain in contact with the heat. That's what's going to give you the golden color. And if you disturb it, that's just not going to happen. What we can do is rotate the pan kind of in a circular fashion around to make sure that it's getting in even contact with the heat from below. All right, so the apples have been cooking for a full 10 minutes, and I'm going to flip them over. Just a slight bit of color starting to show up there, but I think it's okay. Yeah, and this was the full 10 minutes, so I can't imagine what this would have looked like after 5. Some of them got a little bit more color than the others, but none of them are really what I would say like golden and bronzed up. Depending how, I guess, your stove heats, you may want to leave these for longer. I'm going to put these on for another 5 minutes on the rounded side, and we'll see if they're tender at that point. So the apples have been cooking on their rounded side for about 5 minutes total. So I'm going to just take a sharp knife, poke it in, see what the texture situation is. So I'm going to go in this center guy here, and that actually feels pretty firm to me. Feels firm there too. So since these need a bit more cooking time, I'm actually going to flip them back over onto the flat side. That way we'll continue cooking and we'll pick up a little bit more golden color. All right, so we've done another 5 minutes on the cut side, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic about what we're going to see. Yes, I really like that. It's definitely golden brown. I don't believe that that is burnt. I think that is some nice color and really nice flavor that we're going to have. And these are going to just cool down, cut side up until we're ready for them. Oh, I'm so glad that we flipped these onto the cut side again. This looks so much better. And now we've got our skillet still over medium heat, and we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, along with 1 tablespoon of water. And the recipe says we can stir this until the sugar is dissolved, and then we need to stop stirring and just swirl. So we're making caramel. Every caramel recipe says stop stirring and swirl at some point. If you're wondering whether the silicone handle on my skillet does a good job insulating, the answer is no. It doesn't do anything. I assumed it would be some sort of insulation to let me hold the pan, and that is 100% not the case. It's completely useless. All right, so that looks thick and bubbly in a thin layer, which is what we were looking for. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill the heat, and we will let this just sit on the stove to let that caramel cool down until we're ready for it. So while the apples and caramel cool down, we can go ahead and work on the wet and dry ingredients to build our batter. So here I've got the toasted walnuts that have cooled down. The recipe says to do this in a food processor, but as we've already established numerous times, I do not have a food processor. Here I've got my prepared dry ingredients. So we've got Appe flour, cinnamon, kosher salt, baking soda, baking powder, freshly grated nutmeg. And I'm thinking that looks really good, actually. I don't see any nut fragments. I've got granulated sugar and light brown sugar, a full stick of unsalted butter, and this is at room temperature. And so this is definitely an instance where a food processor would be better than a blender for this application. Just trying to scrape the sides, knock any little bits down into the blender to help everything get on its way. And we're looking for this to be light and fluffy, so let's see. I've got some unincorporated brown sugar bits, so I'm just gonna scrape this all around. So we'll go ahead and let this run for a little bit longer. Next, we're gonna add in our 2 eggs, and these eggs are also at room temperature. And then we've got our pure vanilla extract. I find it's best to use real vanilla extract rather than imitation. The real stuff is a little bit more expensive, but I mean, totally worth the investment. Make sure everyone is getting evenly incorporated. All right, so it's looking a little bit split. I'm guessing this is probably a normal thing. This does happen during baking, and I think it's because it wants a little bit of dry ingredients added to it. So I'm gonna put in half of our prepared dry ingredients. It's looking a little bit uneven, so I'm just gonna help it out. We've got a half cup of plain whole milk Greek yogurt, room temperature as well. All right, so I've got that yogurt incorporated. Now we're gonna add the last half of the dry ingredients. And I think that is pretty much as the blender is gonna be able to do for us. So I'm just giving it a quick little stir here, and we can call that good. All right, so we've got the caramel mixture that is cooled off just a little bit. I've got my apple halves here, and now it's time to get things arranged. And then I'm going to arrange them with the larger side of the apple on the outside, the smaller on the inside, and that will just help facilitate the round shape that we're going for. I'm trying to not have the apples touch each other because I want to make sure that the batter can get down in between them. And the recipe said it's okay if there's just a thin layer over the apples in some spots, because this will rise and puff during baking, and so that's going to get everything covered up. So just trying to get the batter spread out as evenly as possible. So we're going to bake this for 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll know it's done when the surface of the cake is nice and brown and the center springs back when pressed. So the cake is done baking. In total, it was in the oven for 35 minutes, so right in the middle of what BA said. It's nice and golden on the top. The top was springy to the touch, and it's been cooling in the pan now for a total of 10 minutes. So at this point, BA wants me to flip it out onto a wire rack. So I'm going to slide a knife around the edge of the pan just to make sure that nothing is sticking. And so far, so good. Made it around, no drama. Okay, this is a little scary. Whew. Nice. Huge sigh of relief. There's a little bit of cake stuck right there. And the recipe said if you have anything stick that you can scrape it off and just smush it onto the top. I'm gonna let this cool down for maybe an hour just to come down closer to room temperature, and then I'm gonna enjoy. So the apple walnut cake has been out of the oven cooling for about an hour. I've got myself a nice slice here. I did some whipped cream with vanilla, a little bit of cinnamon dusting over the top, and I think that this looks so fantastic. So I'm going to dig in here. Mmm. The cake texture is really nice. A little bit reminiscent of a quick bread, like an apple bread or something of that sort. Let's get this guy down here at the tip. Mmm. The texture of the apple is perfect. It's still holding together, but it's very soft at the same time. Really nice. The caramel on the top here is giving a little bit of a crispiness. It's not a ton, but it is very noticeable. This is just so incredible. So the flavors in here are outstanding. I think the presentation is great. What I really like about this, though, is the level of sweetness. This is not an overly sweet dessert at all. So if you've got someone in the family who is not a big dessert person, this might actually be a win for them. So it doesn't feel overly indulgent. I feel like you could eat this for breakfast with some coffee or tea. Afternoon snack, totally appropriate. Dessert, obviously. But I mean, this is just so, so good. So I'm super happy. I really hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.